Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on to chat about the Southwest Division. We're continuing on our mission to break down every prospect in the NBA. Again, the way that these things work, we break down all of the players either on rookie scale contracts or who have 1995 birth dates or later. That's why we're calling it 23 and under. Cole, we just talked like 10 minutes ago. We're recording a second one to get it in the can for next week. How are you doing, man?
Doing great. It's just about the same status as 10 minutes ago. Just this is always fun talking prospects. I'm a little upset that RJ Hunter doesn't qualify today, but I'll deal. RJ
Hunter, the legend. RJ Hunter is maybe like one of my 5 favorite players to talk to that I've ever spoken with about basketball.
Dope.
He is an awesome human being. Like, I cannot emphasize that enough.
That's good to hear. Because, yeah, I mean, he could stick around on a two-way, but we'll see. Unfortunately, we don't get to talk.
Yeah, like I'm trying to decide like how much do we need to talk about RJ Hunter really on this podcast? Probably not much. In terms of intro, I think that's all we're really going to get into because despite the fact that this is going to be a shorter podcast than the 2-hour marathon that was the Southeast Division and the hour 45 minutes that was the Atlantic Division, it's at least relatively interesting, but a lot of these teams are trying to compete. Memphis sees itself as a competitor. Dallas, I don't think, wants to bottom out. Houston and New Orleans and San Antonio obviously are trying to genuinely make the playoffs and make like the second and third round. So there aren't quite as many interesting young players in this division, despite the fact that, maybe 2 of the top 5 prospects in the entire NBA right now are in this division.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think there's a lot of variance as far as a lot of the young high upside guys are either first or second year guys. And then you have a lot of fringe caliber players just because a lot of these rosters, like are trying to compete for the playoffs and their rosters are more infiltrated with more established veterans.
Yeah. And the more interesting, place to start here, because we've introed every one of these podcasts with like a more basic discussion of a team here. But I think it's interesting to talk about Houston in that way, because Houston is, as close as you can be to being an NBA champion. They were up 3-2 on the Warriors, and Chris Paul goes down with a hamstring injury. I think that if Chris Paul doesn't go down with a hamstring injury, we're probably talking about the Houston Rockets as the NBA champions. So, I mean, what do we think about the moves that have been made by Houston this summer? They end up losing Trevor Ariza, losing Luke Richard and Mbah Moute. It very much reduces their depth on this team in terms of switchable defenders. But, they go out, they sign James Ennis, they sign Carmelo Anthony, they sign Michael Carter-Williams, a couple of their rookies in DeAnthony Melton, and maybe Gary Clark could potentially help out a little bit. But, where are you at in terms of how close this team is to the Warriors now?
I think they got worse, frankly, just in how they match up specifically with the Warriors. It's just a hard sell to have Carmelo Anthony and James Harden on the floor defensively at the same time against the Warriors team. They're just going to seek those guys out off the ball. Even Harden was a liability off the ball, far more than Stephen Curry in that series, in my opinion, just because he's just not attentive off the ball. And Carmelo is a disaster defensively. Like, he was horrible last year. You could argue that, again, he was one of the priority reasons why Oklahoma City lost to the Jazz in that series. He was just very bad. And I think Carmelo's going to be better in Houston overall offensively. I think he'll shoot the ball a little bit better, more of a straightforward system. But I do think against the Warriors, I don't know how that's tenable. That whole roster construction, you're counting a lot on James Ennis to fill a role that I don't think he's really qualified for. I think that the hate on Luke Richard and Mbah Moute with his performance against the Warriors is kind of overshadowing the fact that he was really good for Houston last year. And he's at least a guy who can switch. He's a good defensive player. You can count on him. He's one of those reliable veterans like PJ Tucker. And then you lose Trevor Ariza, who was their most versatile defensive player outside of PJ Tucker. I mean, Tucker can play down more as far as 4 or 5 positions, but Ariza was their best perimeter defender. And trading those guys off for an Ennis and then a Carmelo Anthony against the Warriors and then a Michael Carter-Williams who can't shoot, I just don't know how it's arguable that they really improved relative to who they have to beat to go through that specific team to get to the finals and win.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this idea of switchability and the way that the Rockets tend to play, because on one hand, the Rockets love to go like ISO and space out and, kind of allow their playmakers to make plays. It's good whenever you have unselfish players like James Harden and Chris Paul doing that because they tend to make the right decisions. I'm a little bit worried about Carmelo Anthony in that situation because I can see him kind of falling into the trap of taking a lot of contested shots like that.
That's exactly right. He's a self-creator. He's not a creator for others in isolation. So he likes to hard jab you in isolation, stop the ball, and then shoot pull-up twos. That's what a lot of his game is. Hopefully, D'Antoni will rein him in, and he'll take those shots for three. But you're not a dual threat when Carmelo has the ball. He's just not an adept enough overall passer. So for me, I would have sided and gone more with defense because I do agree that Carmelo can isolate, he can get his shot, but in a series like that, the ball is always going to be in Harden's or Paul's hands. So how valuable is that really?
Yeah, like the interesting question to me is, Carmelo Anthony, for a long time has been like a 36 to 39% 3-point shooter, right? Like something in that range.
Yeah.
Like I know that his career is like 34-7, but if you look over the last, I want to say like since 2010, maybe since he got to New York, like it's 37, I think. So my question is, can he be like a 43% 3-point shooter taking a ton of open shots? I think that he probably will be, to be honest. Like, I think that he is just such an incredible shooter that if you give him more open shots, he's going to knock them down. And I think as an offensive threat and as an offensive team, this team is going to be better. This team genuinely might set the record for offensive efficiency next year, just because if they can excise those terrible mid-range jumpers from Carmelo Anthony's game, which I feel like we've been saying for 5 years now, like I think Houston has the best chance to do it just because they have a track record of success now. But like if they can do that, I think this might be the best offense in NBA history. Like Clint Capella is going to be able to be the gravity threat that they need as a player. They're going to be able to have Chris Paul and James Harden continuing to take up those opportunities, and play or pick and roll options and in ISOs. You're probably going to get more games from Chris Paul. Maybe you don't get as many games from James Harden necessarily. Maybe he misses more than 10 games. But like if Chris Paul plays the whole year, if Carmelo Anthony plays the whole year, if James Harden and Clint Capella, guys who don't really have a crazy injury track record, play the whole year, this is going to be the best offense, I think, in NBA history. But the defense, which was so essential to their success last year, the fact that they figured out a way to run that hyper switchable scheme and parlay it into the sixth best defense in the NBA, that's why they were so good. And I think they got markedly worse by losing Trevor Ariza there, because Ariza has long been one of the most underrated defenders in the NBA. Like, I think that he probably deserved more attention for the all defense team than he ultimately got last year. Like, I think he's that valuable to that scheme, and losing him, I think, is just going to create such a void given what they've replaced him with.
I agree with the offensive points. Just for the record, I mean, Carmelo on unguarded shots in the half court last year, 66th percentile. He's a good shooter. I think if you leave him open, if he shoots threes, he's going to be, I'm not sure if he'll be like low 40s, but I think he's going to be high 30s with the looks he'll get. Hopefully, you hope for mid 40s, of course. I think the offensive stuff in the regular season is there. Like, they're going to butcher teams. They're going to be so hard to guard, but this is all relative to the Warriors for me. Like, this calculus, they already finished with the number 1 seed last year. They're damn good. I mean, they're on the precipice. I just think that as it relates to the only thing that really matters, which is beating the Warriors, I think in that series specifically, Carmelo becomes more untenable. You can't play Ryan Anderson when Steph Curry is on the floor. You just don't have enough two-way guys now, because you got Michael Carter-Williams, because in the past he's fared well guarding the Warriors guys on the perimeter. I think that's why the Rockets sought him out, but he's a non-shooter. Nobody's going to guard him. You can't play non-shooters against the Warriors because they're better than any team I've ever seen at helping off those guys. So they'll put Draymond or Iguodala on him, and they'll screw up your entire offense. So for me, it's just they don't have enough personnel now. Ariza might not have been this lockdown defensive player, this dominant two-way guy, but he was damn sure the best guy that the Rockets had for that scenario, and he matched up really well against the Warriors. At least you had someone to throw at Durant to take minutes off some of these other guys. Now you're probably going to get Harden switched on to Durant more, even though they do switch a lot. I just think that they downgraded as far as the value that their personnel had against the Warriors. I don't think it's the same as last year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly there. Again, I still think this team wins 60 games in the regular season. Like, they're just going to be that good. But I think that they are more of like a 5 and 6 and out instead of a 7 and out against Golden State.
Agreed. And I just want to say one thing really quick about Capella. That is an awesome contract.
Oh, like yeah, we should talk about that. Holy shit. That was wild. I understand why he took it, though, because, you know, having $80 to $90 million on the table is a lot of money. Like, it's generational money for your family.
It's life-changing money, and guys never take the damn qualifying offer when that much money is on the table. There's just, can you imagine the sell point there? I mean, of course, I always point out New Orleans, well, that was pretty atypical as far as situation with like personal character stuff, but he turned down 17 a year. Do you wish he could have that back? You know what I mean? Like, that's when you have life altering money, you got to take it. And Houston played this game. I mean, they got a lot of help, of course, because the restricted market is what it is, especially with bigs. They got a ton of help there, but they played this perfectly to get Capella for 5 years, maximum $90 million. You know, $18 million a year, that's above average starter money by a little bit, but you still have some upside there. He's 23. I think that he's going to be worth that contract for the duration. You just rarely see that in free agency, getting a value like that.
Yeah, so like if he waits a year, it's a 5-year, 80 to 90 million deal versus a 5-year, $120 million deal. I mean, yeah, $30 million plus potentially is so much money, but I mean, how big of a difference is it when you have 80 to 90 million on the table? Like, in terms of your quality of life, in terms of setting yourself up for the future, when you're making sure that you lock in that first contract, I get it. Like, I could not pass that up if I was him. Like, there's no way, even though I know that I'm getting underpaid and even though I know that I'm worth more than it, there's no way I'm passing that up.
Well, and he could get hurt. Or
yeah, that's exactly right. Like, that's the key. He could get hurt while taking that qualifying offer. And, you know, Clint Capella, throughout the course of his career, if he would take the qualifying offer there, you'd be talking about him having made $10 million over 5 years if he has like a terrible injury next year versus having like $96 million locked down. Like, that's crazy.
Yep. I mean, there's also time value of money consideration. So I understand why he took it. And a lot of the incentives built into the contract are likely. I think 3/4 of them per year, as far as $2 million a year, are likely. I think the unlikely is based on free throw percentage. I can't remember what they set it at, but it was not something that he's achieved in this past. So it's all based on what you do in your previous year. I think some of it was based on how far he makes it in the playoffs as far as that goes. So I think he's going to make a lot of that money up. So that's not like completely unlikely bonuses like a lot of these guys face that teams just put into contracts. He's probably going to earn a lot of these. They just kind of incentivized it because they had the positional power to. They had the leverage in this negotiation. You see kind of Morey negotiating all the finer points, which I can appreciate for sure.
Yeah, and he'll hit the market again at 28 years old, which if his game continues to age well, he's going to hit it at 29, I guess. But like, hitting the market at 29 is not the worst thing in the world if you're him.
That's actually really good. I mean, I like hitting the market as late in your 20s as possible because then you can lock in as much into your 30s. But there is kind of just on its face, there's a difference between paying a 29-year-old and a 30-year-old. That just sounds different.
It kind of is, isn't it? Let's move on. Let's talk about the Southwest Division prospects. We're going to get into Dallas first here. Dallas has the most on this list of anyone. Really only 2 guys that are like super, super interesting though. And we've maybe spent more time on this podcast devoted to Luka Doncic and Trae Young than any 2 players or any podcast in history, right? Like we talk about Luka and Trae constantly. I don't know what else we have to say about Luka Doncic necessarily, but we should talk about the fit of Luka Doncic on Dallas because I do find the way that they've constructed their roster now very interesting insofar as they have signed DeAndre Jordan and they've kept Harrison Barnes and Wes Matthews and now he's with Dennis Smith. It's at least a very interesting fit.
I do like the fit. Honestly, it's definitely interesting, but people have to realize it's not like a traditional kind of system. Like Carlisle likes to run 2 ball handlers in this game.
Yep.
So there's almost always 2 playmakers. So the playmakers now, basically Luka's taking up Jose Juan Barea. There's Devin Harris, even though they re-signed Devin Harris, but just that second ball handler role, that's the role he's going to fill. Barnes is more of like an isolation scorer. Dallas does run a lot of isolation sets as far as these down screens, mid-post isolations. That's more Barnes' role. He's not really a playmaker in their dual ball handler scheme. So that's how Luka fits in.
I will say, though, like he's not a playmaker, but they run a lot of like random ISO sets for him.
They do. Yes, absolutely. And they do that even for Wes Matthews, too, on post-ups and stuff. Like, they do utilize their personnel pretty diverse fashion, but as far as initiating sets and pick and roll and having those dual options, that's not really the role that Harrison Barnes plays. He's more of a play finisher in advantage situations, creating mismatches.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Continue, though.
So,
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. No, you're good. I just think conceptually the roster makes sense, especially if Dirk comes off the bench. Like, if you want to start Luka at the 3, Barnes at the 4, DeAndre at the 5, Wes Matthews at the 2, Dennis at the 1. I think that lineup makes the most sense. They played Dirk a lot at the 5 last year. That's where he started. They just they said, screw defense. We're going to utilize his gravitational threat as a floor spacer at the 5. So maybe you see him come off the bench and back guys up there. That's how I would kind of proceed.
Let me interrupt again. The problem is that he can't come off the bench. Like, he'll play, I think, with bench units a lot, but he has to start games because his body, like, cramps up from, I guess, reports. Like, I forget. There have been a lot of different reports about that, but like his body stiffens up if he doesn't start the game and like sits down for the first like 8 minutes of the game.
That gets really fascinating as far as roster construction then, because you're starting DeAndre, right? If you're paying him $22 a year, he's not coming off the bench, right? And do you want to start Dirk at the 4? Yeah. Then what do? You bump Matthews to the bench and you start Luka at the 2, Harrison at the 3. I don't like that nearly as much.
I think that's what they do to start games at the beginning of the year, or maybe they bring Luka off the bench. I don't know, but like I bet that Dirk starts, especially at the beginning of the year.
That's really fascinating to me. I'm really hard-pressed to see them bring Luka off the bench just because, I mean, Dennis, they gave him the keys last year. I think they're going to give the young guys the keys. They realize that it's about the long term. They're going to try to win now, too, but I think their priority for them, they've shown that last year, is they're going to put their young guys on the floor. They're going to get them high usage minutes. If they bring Luka off the bench, that would be pretty disappointing, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I would agree, but I think that that's probably what will happen early in the year. Or maybe they'll bring Luka. They'll start Luka and bring Wes Matthews off the bench or something. I mean, like Wes Matthews, I want to say that he started just about every game that he played last year. So yeah, he started 63 of 62 games started 62 of 63 games that he played last year. So like, you know, this lineup's going to go in and out. Like Wes Matthews has the Achilles injury in his past. He'll miss a few games here and there. Dirk's going to probably be on more of a tight rest schedule. He played 77 games this year. I sincerely doubt he plays 77 games again next year. Like I would bet that Luka finds minutes in starting lineups.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe there's going to be more variance. That's kind of the takeaway from this, is there's probably going to be some more lineup variance than at least I initially expected, because I think the lineup that I thought that made the most sense, maybe that doesn't, just because of Dirk's situation. But overall, I think the roster mix is better than people give it credit for. I think there's a lot of, how does Dennis Smith play off the ball? When Dennis Smith's actually a really good catch-and-shoot player. Like, he's good catch-and-shoot threes. He can play off the ball. He can play off of Luka. So it's not like your turn, my turn. I think they're both going to be able to coexist in the offense. Yeah,
no, for sure. And you know, the fact that Dennis has actually been a good shooter off the catch throughout his career, I think, is really important to their development together. I think the fact that we know Luka can shoot both off the dribble and off the catch, like, we should feel confident of that. I know his 3-point percentages are a little bit lower, but he took a lot more contested shots overseas than he'll get this year in the NBA. Just generally, like, I think this is going to be a fit that works well for both parties, both Dennis and Luka, because Luka has played consistently with a lead guard facilitator over in Real and over in Slovenia for tournaments like Eurobasket. And Dennis, I think, could use someone that can take some of that load off of him.
I completely agree with both sentiments. I think Luka, we saw how he functioned next to another primary ball handler playing with Slovenia. That's the kind of system with Igor that he was running, that you just had guys in motion all the time. That's kind of how I envision Dallas incorporating more of their offense towards just getting Luka the ball up, dribble handoffs on the move, and just functioning there. He needs a player like Dennis who can get to the rim at a higher rate than Luka can. That's probably Luka's biggest deficiency, is his dribble drive ability, be able to beat guys one-on-one, get to the basket. And Dennis, his biggest deficiency right now, I mean, there's two things. The first is the pull-up game. He has to get there. It has to be better than it was last year, and it was in Summer League. It is mind-boggling to me. I know this has always been the case with him. He's always been much better off the catch than off the dribble. But the extent of the difference is mind-boggling to me. I don't know why it's that much. Is it a natural body issue as far as balance? I don't know what it is. He has to improve there. He's also not the most high-level decision-maker. Like, Dennis is a little wild. I think his passing's underrated as far as his playmaking ability. He can make more passes. He sees the floor better than he gets credit for. But putting him next to a guy in Luka who is like a bona fide high-level decision-maker, it's going to be really good for him, especially in high, intense situations where a guy just needs to read the floor and make a play. Luka is the guy for him in that regard.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like from a mechanics perspective in terms of the shot, I don't see a whole lot with Dennis that would make him like a much worse shooter off of the pull-up than off of the dribble. Like there are a lot of moving parts with his shot. Like he jumps pretty high on his jump shot. He kind of has like a small, like it's not a hitch, but it used to be a hitch, but like it kind of does push back a little bit toward his face, and then he brings it up and shoots it. So maybe it's just like a too many moving parts things to make it a consistent follow through. But like I agree with you. Like I think at some point he should probably be okay there, right?
I mean, I think so. I'm with you on the mechanics. Nothing really stands out as a stark negative. I think sometimes the control, like how he pulls the ball up and transitions from his handle, it's not the cleanest. It's not like Donovan Mitchell where there's no extraneous motion, right? He just goes right into his shooting pocket and there's nothing on the side. I think Dennis, there's a little bit more variance there as far as just general control, but I like so many elements of his shot. Like he kind of does the sweep and sway thing where he sweeps his feet forward, brings his shoulders back. He gets good arc on his shot, and that's because of his mechanics overall. So I think there's a lot to work with. That's why I liked him so much as a prospect, because I saw the shooting upside with him. His mechanics were better than you got credit for as far as his stats, but it's got to come to fruition at some point, right? You can't be a hypothetical, theoretical shooter off the dribble. Like he needs that shot because guys go under on him basically every time. They did that last year, and if he can make them pay and chase over the top, like his athleticism, his strength level, all of that stuff in space is going to be a freaking nightmare for defenses, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of that. I mean, we've kind of moved into talking about Dennis, and like we should, because these two guys are so tied at the hip. What do we think of the defensive fit with Luka Doncic and Dennis Smith together?
You need better defensive infrastructure around both of them. I mean, I think Dennis his value defensively is going to be in the playoffs where you switch a lot of things. His strength level and his quickness, his physical tools are his best characteristic outside of the length, of course. Like he's going to get off the ball. He's a train wreck as far as his focus. He invents his own rotations. It's not great. He was as bad defensively off the ball his rookie year as you would expect watching him at NC State. He still doesn't try consistently. So there's a lot of issues there, but I do think he can switch and hold position. Like there were times last year where I saw him switch onto LeBron and like actually leverage position against him. Like he's that strong and he's got that build to where I think that is the avenue that he doesn't have to be a liability on switches, but off the ball, not great. Luka Doncic, I think, is going to be a high-level team defender, but I think his team defense, honestly, overseas, we talked about this as far as usage and stuff creeping into the calculus later, but he's not Lonzo Ball off the ball. Like, he's not that good. I think he's going to be fine as a team defender. He's going to hold his own. You don't really hunt that guy in a mismatch. You watch the playoffs, they're not hunting like 6'8" guys who have strength, right? They're hunting the smaller guys. So I don't think he's going to be a liability. I think it's going to be a net positive, but you got to put somebody next to those guys who can really guard on the perimeter, more versatile guys who can guard wings. They don't have anybody in that wing position that is really a stopper level right now.
Yeah, I'd probably fall more toward like net average than net positive on defense with Luka. It's also worth noting too, like with a lot of rookies, you tend to see like a bit of a wall at like game 55, game 60, just because these guys haven't played that many games before over the course of their career at like high level basketball games. Luka Doncic has played 80 and 73 games each of the last 2 years for Real Madrid. So I think that, later in the year, he might be a little bit better than what you would expect from a rookie of his stature, right? Just because he's a little bit more used to playing at that level.
Exactly right. I think that he's going to be fresher. He'll have fresher legs going into next season, and the role, he's not going to have the same ball handling role. A lot of Real Madrid, that was like, it would like come into a dribble handoff, he would sprint off a floppy set, and it would end up in a pick and roll where it would be like a step back three. So I think that Dallas is going to be more inventive with the way they use him. Just one more quick note on Dennis Smith overall, his offense. It's worth noting that the finishing, he got a shot blocked a lot last year. He's got to get better used to choosing between when to finish and when to kick out on passes. I think the length extension with him is something that really is bothersome. Like, he doesn't have long arms. Like, that's something where Donovan Mitchell has really improved in the pros, right? Those length extension, he can really finish it around. Dennis is more of like, he has to get all the way to the rim because he doesn't have good natural touch on floaters. And he's really, really good at using his body to create contact. Like, he doesn't get knocked off the spots, but he's got to get both the foul drawing up. He's got to draw fouls at a higher rate, and he's got to figure out more craft as far as finishing around bodies and just choosing. I think this comes in time as far as parsing between when to kick out, when to drive, when to finish. He's a little bit more of a work in progress as a finisher, but I think the upside is there.
He had .392 points per possession on runners last year. Good Lord. Very correct on your part. He is not good at taking runners and making runners. That was maybe the worst mark in the league among guys with like 50 shots in that regard. 26th percentile around the basket. Again, I agree with you. That length is a problem for Dennis. Overall, I think I'm a little bit more down on his game than you are. Like, I don't think he was particularly good as a rookie this year, which is fine. Like, he's a 20-year-old rookie taking on a billion usage rate, like on a terrible team. He averaged 15 points a night and, 5 assists and 4 rebounds and, was productive, but he really needs to kind of iron out the skill parts of his game at a significantly higher clip. Like his true shooting percentage of 47%. I'm surprised it's that high, to be honest. And like the turnover rate wasn't too bad. Like I like the fact that he didn't go wild turning the ball over. Like he had nearly a 2-to-1 assist to turnover rate, 15% turnover rate, pretty good. But just there are a lot of flags there right now with his game that scare me a little bit, especially in terms of it aging well, because he's so dependent on his athleticism right now. Like the skill level isn't quite where it needs to be for an NBA starting point guard yet. And
to clarify, I don't think he was good last year either. Frankly, he was not good, and that's not surprising to me either. Like lead guards,
it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, primary initiators are rarely ever good. Like situations like Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell, those don't happen. Those are more atypical than performances like Dennis. I agree. He has a lot of areas that he has to improve. What's promising to me, I've always thought he was an upside play. What's promising to me is like Rick Carlisle, from all reports, really likes this kid a lot. And he likes his work ethic. He likes all of the off-court stuff, which I didn't really expect. I expected him to clash heads a little bit based on Dennis's reputation in college. And it seems like that's actually worked itself out. I think that Dennis is actually a pretty hard worker. So he's worked with, the assistant coaches on his handle, his balance in traffic. I watched him a lot, obviously, so I have more to say about him. His balance in traffic isn't great. There's just a lot of areas where he has to improve upon, but he's more of a ceiling play. That's always been what he is. If he hits, he's going to hit big. If he doesn't, you're going to be stuck with kind of what I call the wrong initiator, even though he at least brings the ability to play off the ball and shoot, which is going to jive really well with Luka. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Do we have anything else we want to say about these two in particular? Last note on Luka, I would, completely objectively, I would bet on him for winning Rookie of the Year for what it's worth. I think he's going to be an immediate plug-and-play contributor. I think it's between him and Ayton, frankly, just based on role. And I would side with Luka just because I think he's going to have some big stat games and maybe some triple-doubles. He's going to shoot the ball, I think, a lot better than people expect just based on shot quality. So I'm really high on his immediate translation. I'm really high on his ceiling outcome overall. Completely objectively, I have bet on Luka to win Rookie of the Year. There you go. So, yeah. I'm with you. No, I think that you're right. Like his game is going to translate best to being a contender for Rookie of the Year very early in his career. Let's move on though. Let's talk about some of these other guys on Dallas. Jalen Brunson is the next guy here for me. I am someone who's very high on Jalen Brunson. I think he's going to be an awesome backup point guard from day one. Just a very solid, smart basketball player. And I'm with you. We've been in lockstep on Jalen Brunson throughout. He was pretty horrendous in Summer League, however, for what it's worth. He was bad. Yeah, so that's worth pointing out just to be objective here. Like, he wasn't good. I think that he's going to be better as a pro. I think the shot's going to go down for him more off the dribble. I think some of his craft as far as post-ups, that's going to translate in a backup setting. And in that multi-guard lineup, he can space the floor off the ball. He can run a secondary pick and roll. So I like him in Carlisle's scheme, especially. I think they're going to figure out ways to optimize him. Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. They're going to figure out ways to make him work. It's a great scheme for him because he's good at playing off the ball. He's good at playing on the ball. Just generally a very smart basketball player. He knows exactly what he's doing out on the floor at all times. And he knows exactly what everyone else is doing on the floor at all times. Like I've seen some people, kind of say that they think he was like the smartest player of the last 5 or 6 years in college basketball. Like coaches who coached against him last year. Like they were incredibly impressed with him from what I've seen. And that is backed up on tape, honestly. Like, he looks like a really smart player when you watch him in college. He was kind of an outlier there. That's why you bet on someone like that with a high skill level who can really shoot it, even though, of course, there's pretty stark athleticism deficiencies in his overall game, both defensively and burst-wise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Let's move on. Let's talk about Ray Spalding. Ray Spalding had a interesting career at Louisville. Very long, very athletic. Uses that extremely well on defense. Like he's good shot blocker from the weak side. Moves his feet well on the perimeter, at least for a guy that's 6'11" with a 7'5" wingspan. Like there are a lot of interesting tools here, but the offense is a concern. He's been trying to add a jump shot for a long time, has never gotten it there. I'm very skeptical of it ever getting there. I'm very skeptical in general of him carving out a role unless he's just like a super awesome defender.
Yeah, and he's also really skinny. That's going to inhibit his ability to play the 5 and anchor there. I've always been impressed with his passing ability. I think he has some acumen there on short rolls. He can kind of see the floor a little bit. So I think that's his most underrated skill. But yeah, to be valuable, I think he's probably going to have to develop like a pick and pop 3. It's not completely outside the realm of possibility, but I wouldn't bet on it this juncture. But I did like the gamble that Dallas portrayed here. I was a fan of him. I had him as a top, 40 guy. So I understood giving him 1 guaranteed year and then getting 4 years as far as the latter 3, I think partially or not fully non-guaranteed. So I think that was a really excellent move by Dallas. Just
take a risk. It's fine. I'm a fan of that too. Like it's not even a risk though. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's buying team control for, I think he did get 1 full year, right?
Yeah, he got 1 full year guaranteed this year, and then it becomes, I think, partially guaranteed the next.
Yeah, no. For $2 million, if he hits, he's going to be a very valuable player for 4 years for them. So, yeah, no, like I'd be shocked if he ended up being like a starter or ended up being even a third big. I'd be kind of surprised. But if he can be a 4th big that you can put in and, can step up in injury situations, can do, maybe can really make an impact defensively, I get it. But, it's a smart move nonetheless.
Totally agree. I mean, there's no risk. It's all reward, and that's what you're looking for. If you can get a 4th big or a 5th big and he can stick around in the late 2nd round, I mean, that's a huge hit.
What do we think of Dorian Finney-Smith?
I wish he could shoot. I mean, that's what I think about him. Like, I could see the fit. Like, he seems to be a good enough defensive player overall as far as team defense, switchability, but the shot is just... It's not promising, man. That's always been his bugaboo. Like I saw him play at Portsmouth in his hometown, I think 2 years ago, and his athleticism in person is pretty impressive. Like he's an NBA caliber athlete. It just comes down to the spot up. He has nothing off the dribble, which you wouldn't really expect. He doesn't have a lot of natural touch. So if he's going to be a 29% 3-point shooter, whoever the hell he is, that's just not going to get it done.
Yeah, like to me, like there's not a whole huge difference between him and Taurean Prince, except for the jump shot. Like it kind of shows how valuable it is for Taurean Prince to have that 38, 39% 3-point shot versus someone who's a 29% 3-point shooter, right? Like the difference genuinely for guys like this that are 6'8" and athletic are hanging on by a thread versus like legit NBA starter.
It's pretty crazy to think about that way. It's like an 8% or 9% 3-point difference is the difference between being a starter and maybe not even being an NBA player.
Yeah. And like, look, I mean, Taurean Prince can put the ball on the deck a little bit more. I think he's probably a little bit more skilled as a passer, but like there's not like a wild difference between these two.
Yeah. Prince can definitely do more. It just doesn't really matter that much. Is like, or his contributions in those areas really that impactful? No, it's just the big difference, of course. The separating factor is the 3-point shooting.
Right. Like if Finney-Smith could really shoot it, it would be a totally different ball game. And, it's worth noting as well, over his last 2 years at Florida, over 300 attempts, he was like a 38% 3-point shooter, like 38, 39, like something in that range. He could actually shoot the basketball from distance. And, it's very interesting. There have been guys from that Florida, like, I guess, range from that era of Florida basketball, like Michael Frazier, like Dorian Finney-Smith. These guys had flat jump shots. They figured out how to make them, but it just doesn't translate once you get to the next level because it's a lot harder to make flat jump shots from 23 feet than it is from 20 feet.
And that's what the point I was going to make is I would be curious to see what percentage of his 3-point makes were right at the college 3-point line because that step back is big, especially like you said with flat jump shots. Those shots don't translate well to 23, 24 feet. Like that's a bigger adjustment sometimes than it's getting credit for.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. Next, let's talk about Kostas Antetokounmpo. Kostas is interesting. He's on a two-way. I like the fact that they didn't try and sign him like immediately. He needs a lot of growth. Did not do anything at Dayton really this year. He already, I want to say, is 21, right? Or he turns 21 like right at the beginning of the season. He basically, like I said, he played 430 minutes over the last 2 years at Dayton. He is a fascinating physical frame and fascinating athlete. 6'10", 200 pounds, moves extremely well. Can do a lot, but I just don't, there's no game. Like, he's no game yet.
I saw him play live at Hoop Summit against Ayton 2.5 years ago, and you could see the physical abilities. Like, he would block Ayton's shot at times, like, and it wasn't like any kind of disservice on Ayton. Like, Kostas was actually like pretty damn good defensively in individual sense.
And
I just
that
don't
was
think
during DeAndre's like bored, I'm like barely trying phase too.
That's very correct. Yeah, but I think Kostas, like, he really popped as far as physical tools. He just never really put it together as far as like he doesn't have a skill level, can't shoot. He was always a transition guy when I saw him. Like, he could utilize his skills, or I guess his physical tools in that setting, but it never really translated to the half court. I'm not sure how well he thinks the game overall. I don't have a problem with this move, getting him on a 2-year, two-way. At worst, you get a good rapport in with Giannis in free agency, frankly, and at best case, he becomes like a rotation caliber player. But again, I just don't know if the skill level is high enough to really project him confidently to the NBA level.
Yeah, I agree. Chinanu Onuaku, they just signed him they traded for him earlier this week. I'm sorry. Not someone that particularly interests me, to be honest.
He's got 1 foot out of the league, man, and this is kind of a lesson to not base too much draft projection on advanced stats, because he just didn't really have that projectable game, even though I did like his passing and his defense at the college level. But he's really put on weight, man. I watched him in summer league, and he's too big. He's too much. He ballooned up. He can't move that well on the perimeter.
He's always been huge. Like, that's the thing. Like, even when he was in college, and I'm not blaming you. Like, I'm not like saying that you got this wrong and like people got this wrong, but like, he's always been so big. Like, even he was like 245 pounds at Louisville, 250 pounds at Louisville. He looked heavier than that because it's just the nature of his frame.
Yeah, I've never seen him in person before, so I can't. He looked, I don't really remember him clearly in college, but it seemed like he was more cut. Like, he was never like hugely cut, but he seemed more cut than this. Like, in person, he looked like he ballooned up with bad weight. Like, he couldn't really move that well. For me, he's kind of the antithesis of what the NBA is right now, as far as he can't move well enough in space. So many fucking boneheaded mistakes that he makes defensively. For a guy with like a really sterling defensive reputation, I think that's been his biggest bugaboo that I've seen, even in summer league, is the guy he fouls too much. He makes too many defensive mistakes. Can't move well enough in space. He's really an offensive liability. He can't really do anything on that end. To me, he looks like a guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he was cut after training camp and he doesn't play another minute in the NBA.
Oh yeah, I would be surprised if he makes the Mavericks. I agree. Say that. Terry Larrier, Daryl Macon, any interest in those guys?
Daryl Macon's kind of interesting. He has a following on draft Twitter. A lot of guys like the frame and the shooting ability. I've never really had a stark opinion on him. I like the dice roll here. It's fine as far as a kind of a combo guard who can shoot the ball a little bit off the dribble, off the catch. So that's fine. I don't really have any take at all on Terry Larrier.
Yeah, Daryl Macon, I always have a soft spot in my heart for guys who come up like through JUCO and then like figure out how to make an NBA roster coming up from JUCO. So I am hardcore rooting for Daryl Macon. Like, I want that dude to succeed. He basically just has to knock down shots, pull up jump shots, and be effective as a passer who doesn't. He has to like thread that needle between pull up jump shooting and not being too selfish with his pull up jump shot. Otherwise, he's going to be a good European scorer, I think, basically.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say he's going to be a good European player, in my opinion.
Yeah, Terry Larrier he's had a tough time. Like, he went through a couple of knee injuries. He ended up transferring from VCU to UConn after Shaka Smart left VCU. Like, I understand the idea of him. He is like 6'8". He's very, very skinny. Maybe he can switch some. He shot 38% from three, but like for me, like there's again, just not a whole lot of game there. He's not much of a passer. Has never really made the impact that his defensive tools would indicate. Just not a whole lot there for me.
Yep, I can't really add anything to that.
And then finally, the Mavericks have signed Ding. I think it's Ding Yan Yuhang, right? Anyone who was at Summer League in, I want to say it was it 2017 Summer League, if I remember correctly?
Yes.
We will always cherish in our hearts the moments that we had with Ding, because just an absolute legend of Summer League, where he got standing ovations every single time he took the floor.
Summer League folk hero Ding. Honestly, I didn't go to Summer League that year. I was watching on my TV, and you could hear the crowd chanting for him clearly on the television. Like, he was one of the most popular Summer League guys I've seen in some time, so good for him. Yeah,
last year in China, 59 true shooting percentage, 26 points a game. Like, the numbers over in China, like, don't get super excited about that. Like, I think Jimmer averaged like 40 a game last year in China. Like, it's wild, like the amount that a single player can make an impact in that league. But yeah, Ding. We're all here for Ding.
And it's worth noting, I mean, Dallas has got a really good international scouting department. I think Tony Ronzone is their coordinator there, and he does a great job. Yeah. So it's just probably rewarding him for being able to scout guys like this and giving him a shot internationally, because they're pretty adept at that.
Yeah, no, they do a great job. Like, they've had Maxi Kleber and
he's good
Nicholas Brusino. Yeah, like Maxi Kleber can play a little bit. Brusino ended up not working out, but like they've tried to unearth these guys for a while now, and they've had like reasonable success.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a market inefficiency, is taking shots on these internationals to see if they pan out, because maybe some other teams aren't affording the same level of focus scouting these guys.
Yeah, shout out Maxi Kleber. He like started half of their games last year.
He's good defensively, man. He makes good rotations. He was actually a pretty good rim protector.
Yeah, like, and I think he had like a plus true shooting percentage last year too.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm all in. Maxi Kleber hive. Cole, Maxi Kleber has pretty tremendous hair, but not everyone is so lucky. 66% of men actually lose their hair by the age of 35. But the thing is that when you start to notice hair loss, it's too late. It's easier to keep the hair you have than to replace the hair you've lost. If that hairline is slowly starting to move backwards, it is time for you to go to forhims.com, a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, sexual wellness, and it's all for men. Look, 4Hims is going to connect you with real doctors and medical grade solutions to treat hair loss. These are well-known generic equivalents to name brand prescriptions to help you keep your hair. No snake oil pills, no gas station counter supplements, no waiting rooms as well. There are no doctor visits that end up being super awkward. You save hours by going to 4hims.com. It is so easy. I personally can endorse this as being just such a great way for you to save your hair. Order now. My listeners will get a trial month of 4Hims for just $5 today. Right now while supplies last. See the website for details. This would cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or a pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/game theory. That's FORHIMS.com/game theory, GAMETHEORY, forhims.com/game theory. All right, let's move on to Houston now. Houston, not much to go off of here. I think we can say this is definitely the weakest group that we've talked about yet, because again, Houston competing for a title. We talked about this at the top. This should not really be all that surprising, but I would say DeAnthony Melton is number one for me on this list.
You're damn straight he is.
Well, for you, the Rockets got a lottery prospect in the second round.
You're damn straight they did.
I've seen DeAnthony. Like, I live out here in LA. I know DeAnthony's game very well. Seen him many times, but you're the most excited human being to ever talk about DeAnthony Melton. So I'm just ceding the floor to you.
Weirdly enough, I'm not even the highest on him. Some guys had him in the top 10 ranked. I had him number 13. So I'm very high on him. I thought that was kind of supported in Summer League. Just a guy who performs a lot better in 5-on-5 settings than he does in individual workouts, because so much of what his game is instincts and off the charts instincts defensively. You saw him getting passing lanes in summer league, all the steals. He's just really high level team defender. Not the most imposing size. I will say that watching him up close, he's 6'3" ish. Not that imposing as far as a bigger guard. I think he's big enough to matter. He's strong enough to hold position and switch. But the big development for him, clearly in Summer League, was the off-the-dribble shooting. Made 7 pull-up threes in Summer League. He made 2. I think I voiced this on the podcast before. He made 2 total from college range in his college career, off the bounce from 3. So working with Drew Hanlon has really done wonders for his mechanics, his confidence, no hesitation on some of his off-the-catch shots. He didn't shoot at a high level at Summer League, but the mechanical improvements, if you saw him shoot 2 years ago, they're pretty noticeable as far as fluidity. So in the Rockets scheme, where it's going to be a lot of catch and shoot, a lot of, straight, they play that straight 1-5 pick and roll, a lot of corner 3-point shots. I actually think he profiles pretty well there. He's a high-level cutter, just really knows how to play the game. Awesome fit next to James Harden in lineups where he can guard point guards, Melton being, and then kind of switch. So I love the team fit with him. I thought it was an absolute steal.
Yeah, I definitely agree. 46th overall, that's a massive steal for D'Anthony Melton. Now, I mean, he was taking a ton of contested shots at Summer League, but he did shoot 32% from 3. This is a guy who shot 28% from 3 in his first year at USC before skipping this entire year basically due to being suspended. Massive improvement in terms of the jump shot. Like he's going to be fine in terms of being able to shoot. This is a replacement for Patrick Beverley in terms of what he brought to Houston on a night in, night out basis. Maybe not the intensity, maybe not the aggression, the unbridled, motor and hostility that, Beverley plays with, but he does bring a lot of the same defensive tools. He brings a lot of the same offensive tools, okay distributor, as a guy who's going to create transition opportunities by getting into passing lanes. Very, very good player. I'm a big D'Anthony Melton guy. I had him as, where did I have D'Anthony on my board? I had D'Anthony at number 25. So first round guy for me for sure. Was crazy that he fell to 46. Big fan. I'm a big fan of this pick.
Absolutely. And I think the team fit, with Beverley, not precisely the same kind of player, but filling the similar role as far as a 3-and-D kind of lead guard, who's not really the lead guard. He's more of like a secondary ball handler. I think that Melton is a better passer. There's a bit more feel to his game overall. He's a better team defender, a little bit more switchable with his size. Not the same pest on the ball as Beverley. Few guys are that athletic, but similar dynamic. I think he can fill that if he can make a spot 3. And again, I'm higher on his mechanics now working with Hanlon. I think he's ironed out some of his issues, keeping his elbow better aligned. That's going to pay dividends down the road. So this is a definite steal. I think he can play a role for them this year. Do you want necessarily a rookie playing in the playoffs? Probably not, but I do think that Melton is smart enough to kind of coexist on the floor with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a problem size-wise having him out there with Harden and Paul. But if you can have one of those guys on the floor with him in backup settings, it'd be okay, I think. Big D'Anthony Melton guy. Isaiah Hartenstein or Gary Clark next?
We can go Hartenstein, actually. I think there's some intrigue there.
Yeah, he actually is, a very, very interesting player because he can shoot a little bit from distance. He is legitimately 7 feet tall with reasonable length, probably 7'2", 7'3" wingspan. He was good at Summer League, 10 points, 8 rebounds, 2.25 blocks, 52% from the field, 77% from the free throw line. There was actually a lot of interesting tools that he flashed.
Yeah, he's always been kind of an interesting player to me. Got a chance to see him in person at the Hoop Summit. Didn't really have an avenue to score. He wasn't quick enough with the ball at the dribble, even though he does have ball skills. He's kind of an underrated passer, makes some short roll reads, but he's not high level at really anything. The jump shot, that's where all of this calculus comes down to. I think when you watch his release in person, he's kind of a thumber with his guide hand. That's fixable. I'm not sure if he's fixed that yet. I haven't watched him over the last year as intently, but he did get some side spin on his shots. That he struggled with efficiency and consistency, I will say, as a jump shooter at Hoop Summit. So if he can iron that out, I think he could be a rotation big. I think he can be a 3rd, 4th big. I don't like his posture. That's something that he got knocked a lot because of the back issues. So can he move that well? Is he going to be able to hold up over time? I'm not sure, but I do like the thought process with Houston here. Yeah,
it was it was fine. He was okay, I would say, this year. I mean, there's not I don't know, I'm intrigued by him long term because I buy his frame and I buy his skill set, and I think he can be an interesting short roll passer. in some time.
Yep.
Like I think that his body control actually kind of allows him to do that and be successful at it. But I mean, like I'm not going to sit here and tell you like I think he's like a potential starting center. Like he's at best like a backup center in the NBA, I think.
That's how I view him, too, as far as his upside. But again, I think that's still valuable. If you can get a third big who can do some things, make some plays, especially surrounding Harden and Paul in a short roll, for example. If he can make advantage plays, I think that's going to be big.
Yeah, Gary Clark is super smart. Didn't get a chance to play at Summer League, though, despite signing a two-way contract. I mean, what do we think? Like, this just seems like the patented Chuck Hayes, maybe undersized 4'5", who, as long as he can kind of keep up on the glass, I think that's the big question with him. He did have a 22.3 defensive rebounding rate at Cincinnati last year, so there is some potential there, but he's a good passer, low turnover guy, potential to shoot it at some stage. Like, there's a lot there, I think.
I mean, this is the consummate Daryl Morey analytics play because, like, Gary Clark's box plus minus was like Draymond Green level, and I think that's where they saw the value here as far as analytically. Gary Clark really stood out. Someone who I desperately wanted to include as a first-round pick, but I just couldn't get there. Mm-hmm. I just don't think he's quite good enough defensively in space. Like, even Landry Shamet just pasted him at times in space. He's just not that. He's not that quick. He's not that long. He's a high-level team defender, though. We're talking elite instincts, like D'Anthony Melton level as far as rotating. He's so quick to react. He's so quick to rotate. I love him there. I think he's not as girthy as a guy like PJ Tucker, but that's kind of like archetype-wise what you'd maybe project for him moving forward. I don't think he's necessarily as athletic either, but I do like the dice roll here. It all comes down to the shot offensively. He's going to get the Draymond treatment. Guys are going to leave him open. He developed a little bit as a senior at Cincinnati off the catch from three, but I'm still not really buying it long-term, but that's the shot he needs. He can pass. He's got good feel level, but it really just comes down to spacing with so many of these secondary, tertiary playmakers / just basically catch and shoot guys. They have to be able to shoot.
Yeah, I mean, 62 attempts from three this year, and that was a career high for Gary Clark. He took like a third of as many threes throughout the course of his 4-year career at Cincinnati, where he played like 1,000 minutes every single season. He took about a third as many threes over that 4-year career as Trae Young did over the course of this entire season. So like there's a substantial disconnect there in terms of what his percentages say, where he's a 38% shooter from distance versus what his confidence level and what his mechanics are in terms of that jump shot. I had him like at 60 because I am not a huge believer in his offensive game, but I totally understand why someone would buy into him.
And for all intents and purposes, like, he's a great kid, a great teammate, just a super hard worker. So he's someone who's nice to have around. I agree. For what they invested, which is nothing, really, they're getting a trial here for free. I think that his team defense and his just general IQ, if he shoots the ball, is worth what they spent on him, which is, again, is very low risk. Yeah.
Zhou is next for us here on our trek around the NBA and the Houston Rockets, like, fringy prospects list. Zhou is an interesting player in many ways, but he has so many of the same like slow twitch tendencies that scare me about guys like Bol and like others of this like super tall, super long ilk.
I really like the Bol parallel here. That's really kind of encompasses what I was getting at with Zhou when I saw him play in person. Just not explosive, moving laterally. He's not like not mobile, but he just doesn't. I think the quick twitch is the right way to put it. He gets pasted too often in space because his slides aren't explosive at all. Even with his length, he can't really even stay close enough in summer league to a lot of these guys to block shots. Even though he did that occasionally, when you got like more dynamic point guards, I saw him like later on in summer league, and guys would just take advantage of him and pick and roll. So I just don't think he moves that well. He doesn't have enough muscle. I mean, he's really narrowly built. That's kind of always been an issue. I do like his shooting mechanics. Honestly, watching him shoot in person, he gets great rotation on the ball. Yep. I kind of believe in his shot, honestly, as like a stretch five, but I just don't think it's going to be good enough in space defensively to really survive.
Yeah, I agree. I think he can actually shoot the ball. He was a 33% shooter from 3-point range this year in the G League. 11 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks a game there. In Summer League, it was basically much of the same, if I remember correctly. He was 12 points, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks a game there. Shot 73% from the field in Summer League. But again, like, there are just not enough guards who can really take advantage of him in Summer League. Every single NBA guard is going to be able to take advantage of him in space. In terms of his defensive rebounding ability, like, he's not a great defensive rebounder because he has no girth whatsoever throughout his lower half. There's just not much to be excited about there outside of the fact that he can, shoot the ball from distance and block shots. Like, I understand that that's the archetype that everyone is looking for right now, but you have to be able to round it out with other skills, and he doesn't have the other skills. And athleticism too, actually, is the key.
Exactly right. I think that's the key, is he can't even really hang close enough to really utilize his length all the time, which is his best overall asset, his ability to bother shots. I mean, he can protect the rim when he's around the rim, but I think against NBA caliber athletes, you're going to be able to explode through him too. So that wasn't the best. I mean, Summer League's not the best performance stage for him to really showcase his translatability. I think it's going to get a lot harder for him moving up a level.
Yep. And then finally, Vince Edwards, guy that I kind of like. He's probably going to be an affiliate player for them this year. 6'8", 7 foot wingspan, really good shooter in college. Played reasonably well for them in the summer. Like, what do we think about Vince Edwards?
I've always liked the idea of Vince Edwards. I mean, kind of the combo forward role, 6'8", can shoot the ball, pretty good passer. He just never popped for me in dynamic fashion. When I watched Purdue, I never came away, he never won me over as far as his abilities. Yeah. I don't know how much he really improved in college, exponentially. He kind of seems like the same player. I didn't watch him too much freshman year, but his latter couple of years, it kind of seemed like he was just generally the same player. But I get the investment that Houston made here, because in theory it makes some sense. Hopefully I start to see him pop more in games. I've just never been a fan of his 5-on-5 ability, and comparing him to someone like Kenrich Williams. Vince Edwards is a better shooter, no question, but Kenrich popped in team defense and IQ plays, making good decisions in ways that I just never saw from Vince. Yeah,
so Vince Edwards from sophomore to senior year, 16.5 points per 40 minutes to 18.5. That's not a big leap. 4.2 assists to 3.7, 7.8 rebounds to 9.4 rebounds. Every year in between 40 and 42.3% from three. Every year, 82% to 83.3% from free throw range. It's the same guy. He's been the same
Pretty
guy
much
from the time he was 19 to the time that he is 22 now. And that's fine. That's totally cool. And I think he's going to be a borderline NBA player who probably ends up overseas. But, it is what it is,
Exactly right. I think he's the same guy. You're getting what he showcased at Purdue. We'll see just how well he can fill a role with Houston.
Yeah, and maybe he ends up being an end of the bench guy who can come in and knock down shots, but I don't know. I'm not sure that I see it. Let's move on to Memphis. We've talked about Jaren Jackson probably more than any podcast in America.
I apologize. I apologize to America overall. It kind of seems like a correlation between guys I love and we talk way too much about them on the podcast.
I don't even know that we talk too much about them, to be honest. Do you?
Not from as far as a relativity point for me. Absolutely not. I could talk about these guys all day, but it just seems like from the relative to national coverage, we probably talked about Jaren Jackson as much or more than anybody else combined, probably.
Jaren Jackson, still 18 years old, had a very good summer league. Very, very good, especially in Salt Lake City. Was it 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 to 3 blocks a game, something like that. Was not shooting particularly well overall from the field, but just a monster defender. Did everything that we kind of anticipated.
Yep, much more comfortable than even I expected, shooting above the break from 3. Saw that, of course, that Utah performance, but just shooting off motion, shooting off pick and pops. He can shoot off the move a little bit, and he did look comfortable, again, in pick and pop settings, which is really big for a modern 5 to be able to shoot above the break. So that was the most positive thing for me in his game. I expected the defense. He's obviously a high level there. He's going to struggle to finish around the rim. That was his big issue, is he's not very explosive, exploding through contact at the rim. So he can dribble. I think his coordination as a ball handler is pretty underrated, but he did struggle from 2-point range in summer league, and that's not an accident. He was not proficient there at Michigan State either. He's not a great leaper. So that's going to be an area where he really has to improve, whether that is being better finishing with more craft, even though he does have ambidexterity. He actually prefers finishing left, but just a little bit more pop would be nice in his game.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the difference between him being like a multi-time all-star and being like an elite role player, right?
Sure.
Can he continue to develop as a scorer that can create his own shot going forward toward the basket? Because he's going to get so many opportunities to drive toward the basket and attack closeouts because he's such a good shooter. He needs to keep getting stronger throughout his lower half, needs to continue improving in terms of explosiveness, needs to continue improving his ability to kind of accept contact and finish through it. Outside of that, I mean, there's not much to complain about here, right? Like we're talking about the difference between like one of the top 60 players in the NBA versus like one of the top 20 players in the NBA at his prime, right?
Yep, and it's also worth noting he's never really been a high-level passer, even though I do like the way he's wired. He's pretty unselfish, but he's not like a point forward type. Like he's going to make some plays in time on a short roll. Like I think he's a better natural passer than someone like Zach Collins, but he's not like a high-level playmaker. Yeah,
no, that's definitely right. And I would also note too, man, we keep coming up with like flaws for him, by the way, that the fact that we keep coming up with these flaws is a little bit scary to me, but
tread lightly.
Like not a great defensive rebounder yet either. Like not for what he needs to be as a center in the NBA, he is a below average defensive rebounder.
And he was in college too. Like he's not great at holding position. That's an area where you can really get into his body. You can kind of push him around a little bit. So that's definitely a deficiency. I have been pretty forthcoming on the podcast about that. Like I tend to undervalue defensive rebounding and rebounding overall. So, but that's definitely an area of weakness for him.
Yeah. So like defensive rebounding, finishing through contact, and being able to create a shot going forward. Like those are fair, like for worrying concerns, right? Like those are things that can legitimately like knock your career down a few pegs.
I think they are worrying concerns for his ceiling outcome. But again, his safety to value, if he can shoot threes and he can be one of the best defensive players in the league, which I think is on the table, then that alone has more standalone value than most bigs can provide.
Right. No, I totally agree. Like we're in agreement here. It's just the difference between you had Jaren at 2 and I had him at 4. Right.
Yep.
And to be honest, given their situations, I would flip him and Marvin Bagley now. Like we'll talk about Bagley eventually, but I'm a little bit scared of the Sacramento spot. But like Jaren Jackson is going to be, it's the difference between, like I said, him being a top 60 player versus being a top 20 player in the league. And, if he can start to create going forward and he can pass a little bit and he can eventually fill out his lower half and continue to improve establishing position, he's going to be a great NBA player. Again, only 18 years old. Like the fact that he is only 18 is terrifying.
And the rate that he's improved at as far as in college, like tangibly improved from his senior year of high school, just definitely someone I want to bet on. I love watching him play. I love his demeanor on the floor. He seems to enjoy the game simultaneously with playing hard and having that edge to him. He's a lot of fun, and he's someone who I would definitely try to build around.
Yeah, I agree with you. Defensively, do you want to say anything about his defense that you saw at Summer League other than the block shots?
It was too form. I mean, he's good enough in space. He's not like super ultra quick twitch. I think he might get a little overrated there. Like sometimes he's a little slow to flip his hips, but he's dissimilar from Zhou in the fact that he can stay close enough to guys to use his length. Like he's always been that guy. Maybe he's not Clint Capella as far as movement skills, but he's usually close enough to where he can deter guys, and his motor just runs insanely hot. And I've mentioned that on the Summer League podcast, is like his communication skills for his age are through the roof.
Yeah, no, totally agree there. Let's move on. Let's talk about Dillon Brooks. I am a relative fan of Dillon Brooks after what we saw this year from him. Like I thought was actually really quite good.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to do with him yet. I mean, a lot of what he did was the fact that he just played a ton of minutes. I mean, wasn't he like top 5 in minutes for rookies? So I don't know.
I think he was number 1. Yeah.
Which is nuts, by the way. Like, who would have ever, if you bet on that, you made a lot of money. But long term, he showed enough as a shooter. He's pretty powerful, actually, finishing around the basket. He's got some good hit power to his game, so that really benefits him attacking the rim at times. I want to see how he profiles defensively at higher levels of play with more competition I didn't watch a lot of Memphis last year, just being frankly honest. So I'm going to be watching him closer this year. He's not going to have the same role, of course, with Kyle Anderson coming in. They're going to have more established wings. But for where they picked him in the draft, I think that he kind of paid dividends already. In mid-second round pick, I think that he looks like a rotation player to me based on the sample that I've seen.
Yeah, 65% around the basket, 35.6% from three. That's a good mix. Now, again, much like who do we talk about? Taurean Prince in this regard. Despite that, good mix of finishing at the basket and shooting reasonably well from three, the mid-range shots killed him in terms of efficiency and made him only a 53.1 true shooting percentage guy. Also, not the most instinctive passer yet. Now, this is a skill that developed later on in his career at Oregon, so it's possible that it takes him a year to kind of figure out the speed of the game in the NBA and become a better passer there. But that's plausible. Not a great rebounder, I would say, for a player whose reasonable position is like the 3 and the 4. I would hope that eventually he's able to play a little bit more 4 than what we saw from him this year. Not a defensive playmaker necessarily, not like a terrific defender by any stretch. To me, he's just like a really average rotation wing.
Yeah, I think that's what he is. He's kind of a 3-4 combo. Again, you kind of touched on this with the mid-range shots, but he's someone similar to Taurean Prince, who kind of played outside his realm. 185 pull-up shots last year. That is a lot for any rookie. I don't think I would ever forecast him to take that many. He was actually pretty good off the catch in the 76th percentile. So I think when you scale back his usage and you make him more of a secondary shot taker rather than like a shot creator on that kind of team, it's going to make him more efficient.
Can we talk about Wayne Selden real quick? Just like brief.
Let's do it.
He doesn't really qualify here. I am breaking my rules by talking about Wayne Selden, but they're arbitrary rules anyway. I get to do what I want. It's my podcast. I thought he was better than Dillon Brooks last year, to be honest. He only played like 35 games like later in the year for them, but the skill set that he showed, he was a 40% three-point shooter. He was pretty interesting defensively. Little bit better of a passer, I thought. More of a true wing than what I thought Brooks is. And that actually has a lot of value, being able to athletically match up in a more substantial way with wings.
Yeah, I think that's well said. He's more of a playmaking wing type. He can do more. He has that physical frame defensively. I'm kind of surprised by how good of a shooter he's turned into, like 83rd percentile on jump shots in the half court. Like, that's getting it done. He can shoot off the dribble a little bit. He's good off the catch. When he's unguarded, he was basically 50% from three. Smaller sample, of course, 30 attempts. But if he can shoot the ball, like he always brought ancillary playmaking, even in college. And he has that established, mature frame that you look for. So I agree with you. I actually like him a little bit more than Brooks. I think he was too good for Summer League a year ago. I think he was too good for Summer League this year as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's no way he should have been playing Summer League this year. Like, Memphis has him for this year. They signed him to a 2-year deal in 2017-18. So, like, I think he's going to be very useful for them this year. I will just say that. Jevon Carter, how do we feel about the way Jevon Carter played at Summer League? I actually have gotten randomly a lot of people saying, are you more excited about Jevon Carter after Summer League? Like, he looked great. And I was a little bit, I don't know that I agree with that necessarily.
Well, it was a tale of two Summer Leagues for him. Like, the first part of Summer League, even in Vegas, he was fucking terrible. Like, he was awful. Like, against the Magic, he was not playmaking for others. His shot wasn't going down. He had, I think, multiple plays where he had like 2 almost consecutive air balls in Summer League. So it wasn't going well for him. And then he got in this huge heat streak down the stretch. I think in like 3 games straight, he was knocking down everything. Probably the best offensive. I can't remember who it was against, but it was the first half of one of his latter games, maybe the 4th or 5th game of Summer League. And it was the best offensive half I think I've ever seen from him. Like, he was getting to the rim, like all of this stuff. He was making plays for others. So I still think the same. I don't think he's really like a true lead guard. I think he's more of like a guy you put next to an initiator type. And defensively, he does have the fast hands. He's strong as hell, but his athleticism is overrated. He gets beat probably too much for what he is attributed for. But I think he's a guy at the end of the day that can be a backup caliber. I don't want to call him lead guard, but perimeter player that can come in and pick up guys 94 feet. He probably won't do that too much in the NBA, but at least apply ball pressure at half court and kind of irritate guys for 10 to 15 minutes a game and make some shots.
Yeah, like he's a change of pace guy more than anything. He's not a guy that is going to be a consistent starter in the NBA. His half-court defense, I think, has always been kind of overrated. In college, he can just wreak havoc on ball handlers because they're not good enough. But in the NBA, it's just not going to be able to happen that way. You mentioned that 3-game stretch in Summer League, 3 games in 4 days against the Thunder, Jazz, and Sixers. He was very good in that stretch. I think he averaged like 19 points and maybe like 6 assists or something like that. But, he was fine. He shot like 41% or worse in 2 of those 3 games. Like he had the good game against Utah, but I don't know. Like he's fine. He's going to be a good backup point guard. I don't really have anything else on that. Like he's a good player. He'll be an NBA player for 6 or 7 years probably.
And especially he's going to get all the opportunity in Memphis because he definitely fits that culture as far as the grit and grind, kind of that hard-nosed guy. Very few words. He'll just go out and pick you up and guard you. I just think
very few words. Very few words.
I think he's just kind of been – I don't even know if he's underrated or overrated. I think that the Patrick Beverley comparison, he's just not that athletic. So that's where the deficiencies lie there. But overall, I think he's fine. I have no changed opinion based on the Summer League play.
What did you think of Ivan Rabb? Or where are we at on Rabb right now?
I'm out. I've been out, so I don't see any new information to lead otherwise. Just, again, one of those players where you watch him in 5-on-5, and for me, he never really pops. I think he's, again, kind of a tweener type. He's not big enough to really anchor at the 5. He's not skilled enough to play the 4. He's not a good enough shooter. I've never been a huge fan of his defense. He's a good rebounder, I will say that. But otherwise, I just don't know if there's enough instincts there to really bet on. What about you?
A little bit more in after his rookie season, actually. He actually was not bad as a rookie in the few minutes. Like he played 500 minutes and, 60% true shooting percentage, 25 defensive rebounding rate, 10% assist rate. Like he actually flashed some interesting skills, and he was a guy that I didn't really think played above his means either. And that's like a legit skill to have for an NBA player, I think. So I'm not like in, but I think he's an NBA player.
I think that would be fair. Honestly, like his production kind of speaks for itself. I just think the value areas aren't there. Like the 3-point shooting,
right.
He's never been a dynamic playmaker for others. I don't think he's that good defensively, frankly. So I could see him producing like points and rebounds and being productive, and that might lead to being like a 4th or 5th big. And for that, I guess where they got him, that's a win if he's that. But I just don't value him that highly.
Yeah, like I think he's like a 3rd or 4th big. Like I'm not going to sit here and like say like I'm super in on him, but I'm tentatively in after the rookie year. Like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but like maybe, just half in, half out. I'm fine just being half in, half out on Ivan Rabb.
I think that's probably the safe place to be.
Yeah. Kobi Simmons, any strong Kobi Simmons takes?
Kobi Simmons is very in on Kobi Simmons. That's my take on Kobi Simmons. Just a guy who was made to play Summer League is kind of this. I don't want to say like, I can't say that. He's like kind of a full-fledged chucker. Like that dude.
Oh, he's a chucker. There's no question.
He loves to score. He loves to score, and that's what he is. He's. I think he's on a 2-year 2-way right now, 2nd year now. I think that this is the kind of archetype that I usually try to fade. Not a good enough shooter, and just I don't know if he's ever passed the ball twice in a row in his career. So I don't know, man. I'm just not a huge fan of this kind of player.
Yeah, negative assist to turnover ratio in college. I believe that he had a negative assist to turnover ratio in Summer League. No, it was 1-to-1. Congrats, he improved. Yeah, I mean, he was positive this year in the NBA. I'm shocked. I'm in utter awe.
There's some weird shit happened in Memphis last year, man. I'm pretty convinced.
It was a very strange season in Memphis. I mean, I get it. He's athletic. He's 6'5". Like, you can make that work, but I'm going to pass, to be honest. Yuta Watanabe is a 2-way player for the Memphis Grizzlies as well. Probably more in on Yuta than on Kobi Simmons, but not really in on either.
Yeah, and again, this is a player I can't really add any value to the conversation with, so I'm going to roll with whatever you say.
Cool. Okay, so he was a very good defensive player at George Washington. I believe that he was the defensive player of the year last year. Like all conference level player, but definitely a limited offensive player. Like, you can't like really trust him to shoot consistently yet. And, you know, I think the Summer League probably backed that up. He played Summer League with, who did he play with? Brooklyn, I think. Let me look. Yeah, Brooklyn. Yeah. 33% from three there, 4 rebounds a game, 9 points. He's fine. Yeah, he'll be okay. Like he's not an NBA player, I don't think. Like I would bet he'll play a couple games this year for them, meaning Rui won't be like I think it's the first or second Japanese player to ever play in the NBA. But, you know, Rui will be the first like real NBA player, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, I look forward to watching whatever sample he might portend to if he actually makes the roster and gets some kind of rotation minutes, because Memphis is going to be a little bit deeper this year.
All right. The New Orleans Pelicans, we are just kind of moving right through here. The Pelicans don't really have much on this roster. Their best prospect, I would say right now, is Sheck Diallo. What's his name? Julius Randle has graduated from this by virtue of being a 1994 birthday. Diallo was intriguing from a production standpoint this year, but there are definitely some flaws there that continue to kind of overtake him.
Yeah, I mean, his ability to run the floor and change ends, he's a special fluid athlete at the 5.
Genuinely,
you got to start
think
there.
He is the best prospect I've ever seen at running the floor as a big man.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, you have to, if you want to play high tempo and you want to change the pace, look to contrast with the starting lineup, he might be one of the more ideal bigs to do that, just from a transition standpoint, because he can outrun a lot of guards down the floor.
Yep.
I just don't know what the hell else he really does at a high level, especially
I have an answer.
Playing like go ahead.
Defensive rebound. He's at a 29 defensive rebounding rate last year.
There you go. Yeah, I was not aware. I view it more as like a fit, and last year was kind of a nightmare because you don't want to pair him with either Anthony Davis or Boogie Cousins. So that was kind of always the deficiency, is like he was like a third big who could really never play with either one of those guys. Like I don't know what his value is on that roster, especially just with their personnel. But I guess now you could maybe run him next to Julius Randle, even though that's not a great fit as far as shooting, but maybe next to Nico in a second unit where you can play kind of spread pick and roll and he can be the dive guy. That makes a lot more sense for the Pelicans. He can do that stuff as far as, quickly roll to the rim. He's just not a shooter. He's not a good enough playmaker. And then defensively, I'm not sure if he's really big enough to anchor at all, but you're looking for like an ideal, like high energy third big. I think that's what his ceiling is.
Yeah. So from March onward in the regular season, so like his last 20 games of the year, he was 7 points, 6 rebounds, almost a block a game, 63% from the field on 4 field goal attempts in 15 minutes a night. Like, that's his role, I think. Like, he can grab defensive rebounds. He can really run the floor, beat guys down the floor, create easy looks. New Orleans, if you remember, was the highest tempo team in the NBA last year. So while you're worried about, like, positional fit, in terms of scheme, this is legitimately the perfect place for him to be. Like, this is actually the kind of scheme that he needs to play in, I think. I tend to agree with you now that they've cleared out that front court a little bit. I like the idea of playing him with some of their positional players and positional mixes a little bit more.
Me too. And I think that's the thing that turned me off about him most last year, was mostly the situation and him just being an offensive liability playing next to either Davis or Cousins. It just wasn't a tenable fit. But now next to Mirotic, I think if you really just want to get out and run and change ends, he's kind of intriguing now. I think he has more value this year than he did last year.
Yep. Frank Jackson played 12 minutes of a summer league game this year. It was the first time we'd seen him in a while. 13 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 57% from the field on 4 of 7 shooting. I'm in. I'm back in. No, I'm joking. But like he's an interesting combo guard off the bench for them.
Yeah, and he's kind of intriguing fit-wise next to Jrue Holiday, because Drew's kind of one of those guards you can guard 1 through 3 for the most part. So you can fit. Jackson isn't like a pure point guard. He's not like a high-level playmaker for others, but I think you can get minutes with him at the 1, and his scoring acumen is his best trait as far as his burst. He can shoot the ball a little bit. So I think there's some intrigue there. I think he's probably getting slept on just because people forget about him, of course, because he's out of sight, out of mind. But honestly, out of this list, he might be my favorite prospect. All these guys are in the same tier for me, but I don't think we can rule out him being like a rotation combo guard.
Yeah, like power guard, great lower half strength, 205 pounds at 6'3". At Duke, he was interesting more than like consistently good. They tried to play him at the point occasionally, but I didn't really think that was his role. I think his best role is, in all likelihood, just continuing to try and become a consistent scorer at the NBA level. And, he needs to be a very real 3-point shooter to do that. He was a 39.5 3-point shooter. In college, he was a solid 3-point shooter in high school. As long as he can do that, I think it'll be okay. But he is one of these power leapers that leap off of 2 feet consistently, though. And that's going to be a problem for him finishing around the basket.
Especially if he's in a lead guard role where he's slashing on the ball and pick and roll, for example. Like if he can load up and he's attacking a closeout, that's a little bit of a different setting. But in more of against a set defense, you have to be able, I think, for the most part, when you have a big protecting the rim, to use a little bit more of a 1-foot jump. Yep.
I will give you the floor for this last guy. Kenrich
Let's go.
Williams.
Love Kenrich. I actually really do like this move overall. This is a team that is desperate for bigger wing, like combo forward types. They have a lot of combo guard size guys, and they have some bigs, but they don't really have a lot of guys in the middle outside of like Darius Miller. Solomon Hill, I think, is more of like a straight 4, but he, I guess, meets that size mold. So Kenrich, kicking the tires on him. He's a guy who can really make high-level decisions. You just can't rely on him to really score, but he can dribble, pass, and his mechanics off the catch aren't bad. Frankly, I don't know why he wasn't a better shooter in college. He seems like he's fine as far as mechanically, so I don't know why that hasn't translated to the level it has, but I like him as a secondary playmaker, and he's a really, really high-level team defender, so he knows where to be. He just doesn't really have the athleticism to get there all the time, but I do like investing in a bigger wing like this. I think he can carve out potentially even a role on this team in the rotation.
Sure, we'll go with that. No, he's fine. He's a good player. Like, he's a super, super high IQ player, and someone that I'm rooting for because I think he's a very interesting dude. San Antonio, interesting set of prospects insofar as like all 5 of these guys that I have on my list are guys that we really kind of have to spend a little bit of time on. Lonnie Walker is who I have at number 1, but really it's like a 4-person group out of the 5.
Yep, that's what I have. I have a 4-person group, and they're all in my tier 3, which means like starter quality potentially down the road. Maybe not right now, but I like all of these guys. I think the Spurs are the deepest as far as the number of good prospects they have that I think can be quality kind of rotation / starter level players. They just lack the high upside guys like a Luka or a Jaren Jackson.
Yeah, so let's talk about Lonnie Walker. There was a lot of excitement about his summer league performance. I didn't really get that, though. Like, I thought he was kind of an inefficient gunner at Summer League.
Yep. And I think that, honestly, he just kind of looks the part. And when you see him play in person, like, he's got that strong build. He looks, he's definitely athletic as far as slashing in transition. Summer League's a lot of transition, too. So when he can get in advantage situations, and the Spurs are going to get him good shots. I think that's the key with him is he looks great catching off on the hop. Like, he's a good catch and shoot guy. I think he's got a profile while they're long term. He can, slash in open areas. He can get to the rim quickly. He can definitely finish above the rim, has some craft there. That's the key is, like, aesthetically, the package looks good. But when you really break down the nuance of his game, like, he still misses reads as a decision maker and misses passes, even though he's kind of unselfish. Frankly, I think he probably gets a little bit too much shit for being a straight gunner, when I do think he's wired a little bit more to pass than he gets credit for, but not a high level decision maker on either side of the ball as a team defender. So a guy that has the physical tools that a lot of, I think, evaluators, a lot of teams, a lot of draft Twitter but a guy who never really has put it together mentally. Yeah, like every time we see him kind of play, I always kind of just feel like nothing has been put together yet into a full package. But the skills are there for him to be very interesting. He is an elite level athlete. He is a guy that, 6'4", 6'5", 6'10" wingspan, great physical frame, both upper and lower half. Like, he's someone that you totally buy into being a star shooting guard into the NBA.
I think he's probably more of a starter whenever it comes down to it. Like, I like the idea of him being a scorer who attacks closeouts, who can knock down shots from distance, who can kind of actually handle the ball in a pick and roll a little bit as well. Like, he did that a ton at Miami this year, a lot more than I actually remembered until I went back and watched tape. Like, he's actually a very interesting prospect to me, but it's all theoretical right now. It's not done, and there's no certainty that he will be this super high level prospect.
I'm very curious to see if the light ever comes on for him and he puts it all together. That's kind of how I described him. Just right now, not a ton of purpose to his game overall. He just kind of exists because he's a good shooter, good mechanics. We talked about that in the past ad nauseum, and then he has the physical traits. I'm not a huge fan of his handle. He's functional there as far as he can dribble, but in tighter areas, I have some issues with his playmaking ability in tighter confines and pick and roll, for example. I think that his handle is going to limit him a little bit as far as his star potential, but for me, it just comes down to this guy can be a potential two-way guard with his physical traits. I like his shooting ability off the catch. If the Spurs can simplify the game for him, I think that's where he's going to win.
Let's talk about DeJounte Murray next. DeJounte Murray is coming off of an all-defense level season in year 2. Offense, I'm still pretty skeptical, though.
Yeah, he's really interesting because he's the opposite of kind of what you want from a lead guard. You want the offense, and you can live with subpar defense. And he's become an elite level defensive player, which is kind of crazy after watching him at University of Washington, even though they played a lot of zone. But just the improvement that he's made, he deserves a ton of credit for being that good on the defensive side. But it doesn't really matter when you're a negative offensive player who can't shoot. You're not a two-way player, and like, what does that make you as a guard, even if you are dynamic as a defender? So I'm curious to see if he improves as a shooter, if he improves as a slasher. He's always had a good floater game, but I don't know if that you want that to be your calling card on offense for the most part. Like, he's never really been the highest level decision maker, but we'll see if the Spurs can kind of mold him because he does have some intriguing dribble moves getting into the lane as a slasher. So it's just going to be kind of a work in progress. But I do think that the defense is definitely there. It's just a question of what you value in a lead guard. Yeah,
so great steal rates, defensive rebounding rate of 22.4 for a lead guard is borderline like record setting, I would bet. Like, I can't remember a lead guard who had a 22 defensive rebounding rate.
That's nuts.
Yeah, like, 20% assist rate. Like, to have a 15 PER with a 48.5 true shooting percentage is basically impossible, and he figured out a way to do it. Defensively, he's very good at the point of attack, very disruptive, uses his energy well. He's very good off the ball as well now. The Spurs have done such a great job with him developing his defensive acumen. This is a defensive staff that I think somehow has gone underrated over the many years that Greg Popovich has been there. Like, if you look at their defensive finishes since Popovich has been there, it's completely bananas. Like, their worst defensive finish is like 17th or something, and then their second worst is 11th, and then they have like 16 out of 20 years in the top 5. It's crazy how good and how consistent this team has been defensively. So I just kind of trust them to get the most out of players on that end. In terms of Murray on offense, I don't really think there's much ceiling there. Unless he shoots it. Like, he absolutely has to become a proficient 34% 3-point shooter probably.
And just looking at his synergy stats right now, I think it's pretty illustrative of what the problem is. He's actually not bad as a dribble pull-up shooter, but it's all mid-range, and he's not good enough. Like, he's 37th percentile. He can't play off the ball. That's the thing, is nobody guards him. You can see that. He only took 36 attempts catch and shoot in the half court last season. That's pretty unreal for a guard to only take 36 shots off the catch in the half court. That's nuts. So that just kind of shows you. It's kind of like
a bad Dennis Schroeder on offense right now.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's kind of scary. When you have a guard that needs the ball, that can't play off the ball, and he's not good enough with it, that's probably the most damaging archetype in the league, although at least Murray plays defense at a high level. Like, most of the guards that do that are also bad defenders, so they're taking everything off the table. Murray at least brings it on one side of the ball, but again, you want offense from your lead guards, and right now he's a negative offensive player.
Yeah, so, he needs to shoot it. Like, there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about this. He needs to become a threat as a shooter. That's really all I have on him. Like until that part gets figured out, there's really just not much going on there. Like defensively, he's unbelievable. He's very, very good, but offensively, it's just a negative. Let's talk about Jakob Poeltl next. For me, Poeltl has always kind of profiled best as a backup center. He's just not a good enough defensive rebounder. He has developed into a really good rim protector throughout his time in Toronto. But for me, I think that he needs to bring more to the table in terms of being able to consistently pass on short rolls, being able to consistently maybe knock down shots from the perimeter. He's basically just a post guy / pick and roll all the way to the basket guy.
Yeah, I just don't know what his one plus skill is overall. Like, he's a pretty good short roll passer. I think he's improved there. He's not like a dynamic pick and roll dive threat. He's not going to like catch lobs emphatically. He's not a pop threat. He's not a spacing threat from three. And then defensively, I think he has some good reactive ability, even in space. Like, he moves pretty well. I think his foot speed is kind of underrated. I just don't think he doesn't really play with the level of physicality that you want from a five, and he's not dynamic really anything. Like, he's good in space, but he's not great. He's not a great rim protector. He's fine in certain respects. He's a pretty decent team defender overall, but overall, I just don't know what is he really bringing to the table that makes him like an above average or even average starter at this level. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think that you're hoping he develops into one of the league's best rim protectors, probably, right? Like, he's an above average rim protector right now, I think. He needs to keep developing that, and he has really good hands. He can finish around the basket. You're hoping that he is your patented pick and roll, can beat mismatches, can finish lobs, can beat guys in the post with like that little like hook shot that he has such a high release on that it kind of just goes over everyone. There are skills there, but I just don't know that they're multi-versatile enough and like high level enough. Like, he's not going to be Rudy Gobert as a rim protector. He's not going to be Mohamed Bamba as a rim protector in all likelihood. Like, he really needs to be just super, super elite. And that's before we get to the fact that he's like a 57% free throw shooter that you probably don't want on the floor late in games because of that.
Yeah, I think the best thing he has going for him is he seems like a cerebral player, and that usually bodes well when you play for San Antonio. Like, they'll figure out how to optimize his game. But again, I just don't see impact in any skill category, any really avenue to high level ability. He doesn't have the physical tools, the girth, the length that's crazy. So he's solid. That's why I have him in this category. He's kind of just a solid player. I think he's an NBA player long term. I think he's a third, at worst fourth big. I just don't see, this is kind of my issue with him at draft time. Like, I'm not drafting a backup center in the top 10. Like, that's just a hard sell for me, even though that class was terrible.
Yeah, like, I think he's definitely established himself as like a third big in the future. Like, I'm not worried about that. It's whether or not he can develop into a starter, and I don't know that I see that necessarily.
Agreed.
At least, like, maybe he can be a back end starter, like one of the like bottom 7 starters in the NBA, but like, we're talking about like super high level,
Yep.
Derek White is a guy that I know that we're both very high on. We are Derek White hive on this podcast, I think. Just kind of, we talked about him a lot on the last Summer League podcast, so I don't know that we need to go like super in depth on him, but what are the skills here that really interest you?
Yeah, this is definitely a Derek White podcast. I think just in that system, the ability for a guy with his kind of combo guard size, like 6'4", 6'5", that can dribble, pass, and shoot is just really alluring. His shot is functional. He can shoot off motion. He has a good pull-up game. I think he's got a high enough release point, and he's good in pick and roll as far as that goes. He can create for others in a pinch. He can be a secondary ball handler type. Can even initiate your offense for stints. I think he's that good. And then defensively, someone who maximizes his functional athleticism. He's never going to be an impact defensive player, probably even a positive, but I think it can be an average one. And that kind of ability to play both sides of the floor and really fit within the scheme, especially San Antonio's scheme that requires a lot of off-motion ability. I think he can come off a dribble handoff and be an asset there, both as a pull-up shooter and as a passer. Just a lot to work with there that doesn't really scream, high upside. That was never really the allure with him. It was more like kind of an interesting median outcome. I think he can potentially be a low-end starter depending on who he's paired next to, but most likely a third guard, but a potentially really good one. Yeah,
I think I would go third guard for him. Yeah, and I think he will be a very good third guard. He does need to keep developing just his body, I think, more than anything. Like that's the big key. Like he needs to just get stronger. If he gets stronger, I think he's definitely going to be like a very good rotational guard. It's just like right now, I think it's tough for him.
Yep. And I think he's got to do that pretty quickly. We're talking about someone, again, who's 24, but he's going to get a chance this year. I thought he didn't really get a fair shake last season overall.
This is, he missed, I think, it was at least half the year. It might have been a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, and San Antonio is usually deep. So, it's hard to really carve out rotation minutes. But this year, with Tony Parker gone, I think he's going to get more time, more usage on the ball and off the ball, just more floor time. Because, we saw him in Summer League. It looks like he's ready to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. The last guy here, Chimezie Metu, a guy who's always been, the idea of him is very interesting. Like the thing that I kept seeing people say about him in pre-draft build-up was that he's raw. And I don't agree with that at all. Or at least in terms of his offense, that he's raw. He actually has a very polished handle. He can shoot from distance a little bit. He has like a really interesting spin move. Like I actually think he's pretty polished offensively. It's just whether or not he's like one of those guys who's kind of stuck between the 4 and the 5 in the NBA. And I just don't know if he's going to be able to really kind of overcome that.
I'm worried about him. I agree with you offensively. He's got some tantalizing skills, and he's a great athlete as far as diving to the rim. He has some emphatic finishes.
Athlete.
He's coordinated. I have no issues really with his offense. It's more the defensive end. Like he made TJ Leaf look really good defensively, and that's hard to do. Like frankly, like his off-ball defense, he falls asleep. I don't trust him.
He's not that bad defensively. He's not on TJ's level.
No. He made TJ Leaf look good as far as TJ's offense.
Oh yeah.
I phrased that wrong. In that game, I thought the TJ looked probably the best I've seen him play offensively, and a lot of that was Metu's bad closeouts, just his late rotations and stuff. I just don't have a lot of faith in his team defense ability. And like you said, kind of caught between two positions there. If you play him at the 4 defensively, you're playing him at the 4 offensively. That negates some of his offensive value, which is kind of why you're playing him, because he's not a defensive prospect. He's more of an offensive prospect, and you can't really anchor your defense defensively. So I get the allure with him. I think you said it well as far as you get him in theory, but how it really manifests on the floor is probably not going to equal what guys think of him as far as his ceiling outcome.
Yeah. I think he's a guy that you put in Austin for a year, you see how it goes, and then, you make of it what you can. But that's the last guy, I think, on this list.
That's the last one I have.
Yeah, Bryn Forbes, Davis Bertans, they're all on second contracts, and they're all 25, 26. So that's all I got here.
I think we forgot some Pelicans guys. Tony Carr, Trayvon Blewett. I don't know if any of those guys really moved the needle for you.
Oh, no. I forgot Trayvon Blewett. Tony Carr, I don't really care about. But, Trayvon's good. Oh, no. Oh, disaster. I actually have him written down, too. Let's talk about Trayvon real quick. 2-way contract guy. Was really good in his first 2 games at Summer League. Kind of tailed off a little bit from there. Professional scorer, super quick release on his jump shot. Incredibly quick release.
Good God, he was 16 of 31 on jump shots in Summer League. Holy shit. Yeah, definitely the quick release. That always stood out in college. I thought he could shoot the ball off the catch. It just depends on the defense and the playmaking and all that other stuff. But I definitely appreciate the Pelicans. Oh, my God, he was 12 of 19 on catch and shoots, 98th percentile in Summer League. So, yeah, he just shot the living hell out of the ball. He can shoot it. The question is, can he do anything else, and can he stay on the floor athletically?
Yeah, and then Tony Carr is going to Italy. Yeah, I thought I
gotcha.
knew that. Yeah, I was going to say.
I did not see that. Yeah, that's my bad.
Tony Carr is going to Torino to play in Italy. So yeah, we're in good shape on Tony Carr. But Trayvon, I'm sad I missed Trayvon, because I've been on the where did I have Trayvon on my last board? Probably in the 60s or 70s. Yeah, right around there. 60s, 70s. I'm a Trayvon Blewett guy.
Yeah, based on Summer League, I didn't get a chance to see him play live, but he really impressed. He's someone I went back and watched some highlights on, and the shot is real.
Yeah, it's one of the quickest releases in college basketball over the last 3 years. I think it really might be quicker than Trae Young's release.
Big words, man. Those are fighting words now.
But I'm not saying he's as good of a shooter as Trae, although I think that. To be honest, I think he probably is. To be honest, but super quick release, so quick.
There you go.
I think that's all we got. Do we have anything else we want to talk about here? I think we're done.
I think that concludes this division for sure. Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Cole, tell the people what you've got going on in your life. What do you got coming up on the Stepien? How is your life going? Just tell people what's going on here.
Yeah, it's going well. It's a weird time of year for us kind of NBA draft junkies that do this around the clock for 9 months, and then you reach August and you can't even like update cap sheets anymore because you already exhausted that. So there's not really much to do except for dive into the 2019 class, which is what I've tried to do. By the time this podcast comes out, I'm guessing probably next week on the Step In, I will have a second piece up. I talked about the RJ Barrett piece on the previous podcast. I will have a piece on Nasir Little and kind of what I see in his game. More of he doesn't have the established sample as RJ as far as FIBA play and all that, but more the AAU, and kind of he really impressed at McDonald's. So look for that on the Step In. And as usual, continue to listen to this podcast.
It's kind of crazy that Nasir Little was like a 4-star prospect coming into his last year of AAU basketball.
God, he's good, dude. I mean, I can understand that. I watched his tape back from a year ago, and I do get kind of the 3-and-D vibes, but his shot is a lot better than he gets credit for, man. A lot better as far as the functionality. He can get his shot in multiple ways. I'm kind of blown away with that aspect, but again, I haven't seen him on a good enough level to really have a lot of confidence projecting, because it's not like he's played for, Team USA or something in FIBA. Like, it's mostly AAU stuff, but I'm really impressed.
Yeah, like with him, to be honest, like I have him somewhere in my top 5, maybe like 3rd overall right now. I honestly think he's just like a starter in the NBA. I don't think he's much more than that.
I think his ceiling is higher. His pull-up jumper is the best out of all the wings that I've looked at. Like, better than RJ there. I think he's a power wing. Like, if you want an archetype, he looks the most Kawhi Leonard-esque to me of all the prospects that have come around recently. Everybody gets compared to Kawhi, that you can usually write them off from the off with physical tools, lacking the strength, like Mikal Bridges, Josh Jackson, lacking the length, for example. But this dude, the way he competes,
Nasir is nowhere near as long as Kawhi.
Well, he's 7'1" wingspan. I mean, he's not 7'3", but he's pretty close as far as stature. Like, I think Kawhi coming out was 227. Nasir now is 220, and he's still adding to his frame. He's got a really good frame. Like, I think that he can get to that 225. He can be that physical. He's not quite as long, but he's a way better shooter than Kawhi was, of course, as a prospect. Of course, it's unreasonable to expect him to improve at the rate that Kawhi does as a shooter. But I think that his pull-up ability, his power wing ability, that's the closest thing I've seen to Kawhi since Kawhi was drafted.
I'm in on that. I like that take. Very, very here for that take.
Not sure how hot it is, but it's my initial impression of him. I'm not sure if it's going to hold up in college, but just based on the limited sample that I've seen, I think that he is reminiscent of that archetype.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I'm going to write about Nasir at some point, like coming up in the next month or so. So I am a fan. Like I said, I have him at number 3, but like it's just a bad draft, I think. And that's why I'm like, we'll see.
Oh, yes, it is.
Go over to theathletic.com. I'll have something up at some point, I'm sure. I just don't know what it'll be by the time this podcast comes out. This will be up on Sunday/Monday. So yeah, I'm not sure yet. Just, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. I hope you're really enjoying this little project that Cole and I are embarking on. And, it's August now, so we're really into the doldrums of basketball. I appreciate you guys continuing to help the podcast grow. That's always very nice to see the numbers continue to rise. So I think that's about all I got at this stage. But, until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.